is the 4th of February in the year 2000. Dog Ten Tente is bringing her 13-year-old niece, Kinzar Lewin, to a party for the 51st birthday of a very special man. It's a beautiful day. Utain Lewin is that man. Utain Lewin is the founder of the Yangon Education Center for the Blind in Yangon, Myanmar. Utain Lewin is blind. So is Kinzar Lewin. 33 years ago, the 1st of February, 1967, 3 days before his 18th birthday, Utain Lewin and 2 of his fellow high school students were working in the chemistry lab at their school. They were experimenting with a rocket propellant. Without warning, there was a terrible explosion. In one horrifying instant, Utain Lewin's life was forever changed.
When I heard the sound of the explosion, I dropped the newspaper I was reading and ran towards the school.
When I looked back, there was so much smoke, I couldn't see a thing.
I couldn't see anything at all. I couldn't, but I knew my head was bleeding. Black clouds of smoke filled the chemistry lab. Shards of glass covered the floor. I ran into the dark room and found 2 men. We carried the 2 of them outside. We didn't know who they were. There was a part of an arm and a hand still in there.
His face was completely burned with chemicals. He has been blind ever since.
When I realized that I was going to be a blind man for the rest of my life, every day I only wanted to die. I felt as though my life had become hopeless and meaningless. Dying seemed like the best thing that could happen to me. I was extremely worried about my future. My worst fear was that one day I would become a beggar on the streets.
As a bright and eager student, he dreamed of one day becoming a scientist. He never imagined losing his left hand and forearm, parts of his right hand, and most devastating of all, his eyes in a sudden blinding flash.
When I became blind, people stopped talking to me directly. They would speak to the person beside me as though I weren't there. I couldn't talk to people in a normal and casual way as I had before, so I decided I had to get an education. When it came time for me to take my examinations for the 10th standard, I couldn't read Braille or written lessons. God came to me in dreams. I prayed to him. It was impossible to read the test paper, but I passed with his help. From then on, I came to know God's power. To take the Moulmein train south to buy goods brought in from Thailand. We would bring these things we bought back to Yangon and sell them. Sometimes the train was so packed with traders like us that we had to stand the entire trip to Moulmein.
We helped him from the bus stop to his classroom. While he listened to the lecture, we would take careful notes and read them back to him later.
In 1977, Utain Lewin was working toward his master's degree from the Yangon University of Arts and Sciences. He had to make a choice. His first ambition, to gain an education nearing an end, he chose to work toward his primary goal, which was to find a way to help blind people achieve confidence and possibility in their lives and regain their value as human beings.
At the beginning of his life as a blind man, he had to struggle a lot. As a result, he wanted very much to help other blind people like himself avoid the same troubles he had gone through.
According to statistics published in 1973, there were more than 200,000 blind persons living in Myanmar, but only one school. Having achieved a significant degree of success in his new life, Utain Lewin was doubly blessed to find the love and companionship of a woman who accepted him as a person, as a man, and as a husband. Her name is Na Amu Tu. Together, they have 3 daughters and 1 son.
At first, I had no intentions of marrying a blind man. I had no feelings for him on our first encounter. But as we worked together, I came to see how highly he values education and that he is a truly respectable person. If you look at his abilities, he is actually a very capable and dependable man.
Kinzar Lewin is blind and developmentally disabled. Her family is deeply worried about her present condition as well as her future happiness and well-being.
She was the only blind person in our family. We didn't know how to care for her.
On an earlier visit, Da Tan Tan Te meets with her old college classmate to discuss ways to end the futility and hopelessness of her niece's life. Since their time as university students together, labored to defeat all obstacles to creating a safe harbor for blind children like Kinzar Lewin.
The reason I wanted to form the Myanmar Christian Fellowship for the Blind was that in those days, blind people in Myanmar were almost helpless. At that time, most blind people lived very poor lives. So in 1975, 14 blind men, including Uso Tupwe and myself, formed this organization. Here in this very place, beneath the bell of the self-supporting Kayin Baptist Yangon City Church, was our first office.
During the early 80s, there were many difficulties to overcome. The main problems were:
to become an officially recognized organization, we would have to approach the Socialist Party, which was in power then. When we met, the original members agreed that this would be necessary. An initial date was set, but when the time came, the committee cancelled from their own accord. I became disillusioned. I told them I would have nothing further to do with this committee. There was too much disunity.
I felt deeply depressed during those early times, when we were first forming our little group. First, outside people were trying to abolish our fledgling alliance. Then there was the trouble we were having trying to elect a head for the committee.
It was impossible for the Myanmar Christian Council of Churches to accept the Myanmar Christian Fellowship of the Blind because it was not church-based.
The biggest problem we faced was a complete lack of public trust in us. At that time, I was not a Christian. No one recognized us, including Christian churches. They doubted our honesty. We might or we might not do the things we were claiming, or so they thought.
In the beginning, success was modest. The first 10 years of struggle were the hardest. Originally, the organization was named the Burma Blind Christian Fellowship, which was sanctioned by the Myanmar Christian Fellowship for the Blind in association with the self-supporting Krin Baptist Mission Society in Yangon. From those first humble efforts, U Thein Lewin has worked step by step, following the path he has chosen.
The Myanmar Christian Fellowship of the Blind has had 3 previous head offices before this, our present site. The school itself is at the 2nd location. The first school building was too small for our needs. We were only there for a year and a half. After our search, we found our present locality. We purchased both places.
In 1981, the school received substantial assistance from the German Christoffel Blinden Mission. Starting in 1992, the government of Myanmar began to pay closer attention to the efforts being made on behalf of the blind. Public funds were made available. 1996 was the year the organization became a special member of the World Blind Union. Those are a few of the milestones along the way that helped make the Myanmar Education Center for the Blind an internationally recognized educational facility for the visually impaired. Today, U Thein Lewin serves as the General Secretary for the Myanmar Christian Fellowship of the Blind. He also participates in many committees within the Council of Churches, as well as being a representative on the National Commission on Social Development under the auspices of the Ministry of Social Welfare, Relief, and Resettlement. He also sits as the president for the private nonprofit Myanmar National Association of the Blind. Today, there are schools serving the south of Myanmar in Yangon, the northern regions in Myitkyina, and in Pado town in Bago Division. All of this is no longer a dream, no longer the hopes of one man. U Thein Lewin has made his vision come true, turned it into a reality. The Myanmar Christian Fellowship of the Blind is no ordinary institution, just looking after the basic needs of the blind. Within the limits of their blindness, the students learn to make choices, set goals, feel confident and capable. With their white canes leading the way, they can travel the world wide. The Myanmar Christian Fellowship of the Blind teaches its pupils that they do not have to be dependent on the care of others. By working hard, they can live free. They can strive for the good of all society as energetic, independent people equal in their own right. U Thein Lewin's Myanmar Christian Fellowship of the Blind is not the final refuge for the helpless. It is not a last resort, not the end. The Myanmar Christian Fellowship of the Blind endeavors to be a symbol for everyone, regardless of their limitations or handicaps, with the idea that if you are faithful to your aspirations, you have a chance to win. You can triumph over your adversities. Whatever hurdles life may have laid in your path, you can succeed if you stay true to yourself and your dreams. U Thein Lewin, who has accomplished great things in his life, is dedicated to bringing that same message of encouragement to the futures of all his children. Daw Tan Tan Tay, who only hoped to fulfill the most basic needs of her niece, now feels optimistic that Kinzar Lewin will enjoy a life she can feel proud of. She will become a person able to
This
stand
school
on her
not
own
only
2 feet.
gives such children an education, it teaches them to sing like all the others.
U Thein Lewin and everyone involved in the Myanmar Christian Fellowship of the Blind has traveled down the long, hard decades, has worked tirelessly with courage, stamina, and determination, inspired by the guiding hand of the Holy Lord God, dedicated to the single goal of educating and advancing the blind of Myanmar. This year, the first year of the new millennium, marks the Silver Jubilee of the Myanmar Christian Fellowship of the Blind. May the next quarter century bring as much joy and dignity to all the people of Myanmar.
Forget